We are back, Devils. Welcome to Season 8 of EVTV. My name is Jack.
And my name is Franco.
For Devil Duels this year, we are doing Decades Over the Time. Our EVTV special dives deep into each of these decades. So now we're going to dive right into the 50s.
A lot of the 1950s are really typified by people trying to be what is American. So this is the first time since after World War II that teens are being asked to go to high school and stay in school versus get an 8th grade, 6th grade education and then get a job. There was huge movements towards getting kids math degrees, science degrees, so that they could innovate and we could get ahead of the Russians. Everything was motivated by this fact of we cannot let the Soviets beat us out when it comes to innovation and anything with regards to society.
With all of the pressure society put on our students, they needed to find an outlet to express themselves.
The teenager was defining who they were in society. Never before had they been allowed to do that. Let's look at cinematography. The 1950s gave us great directors that, were able to kind of make Hollywood a big name. 1950s were huge for pop culture. I mean, without the rock and roll movement, without Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley, Little Richard, all of those guys, you would not have the change up in music that we had. And still to this day, the teenager in our societies run our pop culture. They determine what's going to be popular in terms of music, and they determine what's going to be popular in terms of cinematography and television and stuff like that.
While there aren't many people who can give an eyewitness report as to what the 1950s were like here in Gypsum and Eagle, we do still have things from that time. However, the only things left from the 1950s in the building are the pictures up in the Legacy hallway and the remaining 1950s yearbooks. The content within is stuff that you'd expect from a yearbook, with pictures of students, staff, and activities in the school. But if you look closely, you can see it was written on a typewriter. I wonder how many times they had to redo pages because of how hard typewriters are to work with. The other notable thing in the yearbooks is how vastly different the ideas of the past were to ideas today. Needless to say, some of this would be considered problematic if in this day and age.
This has been Jaden, Matt, Michaela, and Bodie with Eagle Valley Student Media.
Whoa, Jack, do you feel that?
Feel what?
The disco. It's taking us back to the 70s.
The beginning of the 70s was pretty much a continuation of the 60s. It was a time of great change and turmoil in our country.
I guess in the 70s, and it was a pretty wild time.
The 1970s was a huge turning point for the lives of many.
A lot of inflation, things like that. Very similar to the way things are today, actually.
Things were much more inexpensive. We didn't have all the expensive gas prices. In fact, I believe that gas was under $1 for a gallon of gas back in those days.
I mean, everything was a lot less expensive, but then people just didn't make as much money.
The minimum wage in the United States in 1970 was only $1.60, which brought in close to $3,330 per year before taxes.
I did a lot of marches for feminism and women's rights. I've always felt that women deserved equal rights, equal pay, and equal recognition.
From the early 70s until the Vietnam War ended, it was on my mind because everybody, was worried about the draft.
Music played a huge part in the 1970s.
I loved my music. I played in the garage band.
The music was very varied. There were a lot of new artists that came out. Disco came out in the 70s.
Disco's terrible. It was the death of music, but there was also a lot of great music.
The 1970s was a great time to grow up for many.
I'm glad that I was able to be old enough to participate in a lot of the social movements back then.
The 70s, I thought, was a good time to grow up, except for disco. Have I said I don't like disco?
Man, am I staying alive. Can't wait to see what you guys cooked up for Devil Duels.
Thanks for tuning in to our EVTV special this week. See you next time.